Husband divorced his grieving wife after her mother's funeral. Unaware she inherited a $30 million estate, he divorced her while her black dress still smelled of rain and funeral flowers. While the dirt on her mother's grave was still fresh, Ethan Williams stood before Nora with divorce papers in hand. Cold, unblinking, heartless. "Sign it, Nora," he said flatly. "I can't keep living in this darkness. You've turned this house into a tomb." His words sliced through her like the wind that had howled at the cemetery. Just behind him, Lydia Cole, her supposed friend, stood with folded arms, feigning pity but hiding a satisfied smirk. She had been helping Ethan cope, visiting every day since the funeral, and now she didn't bother to look away as he slid the pen across the table. Nora's fingers trembled. The silver bracelet her late mother gave her dangled loosely from her wrist, the last memory she had left. "Ethan, this is my mother's 7th day," she whispered, tears spilling. But he didn't flinch. He only sighed, already glancing toward Lydia. That was the moment Nora realized grief had made her invisible to the man she once called her home. The man who vowed to stand beside her through death had turned into a stranger before the candles at the memorial could even burn out. He thought her brokenness made her worthless. He thought walking away meant freedom. But what he didn't know was that the same woman he cast aside in sorrow was the sole heir to a $30 million estate. Her mother's last act of love, waiting quietly in the hands of a lawyer who would soon change everything. Sometimes the wife you abandon beside a coffin becomes a storm that sweeps away your pride. Sometimes the tears you mock become the fire that lights her rise. This isn't just another story of betrayal. It's the cry of a grieving heart turned unbreakable, the silence that hides strength, and the warning the world forgets too easily. Never mistake mourning for weakness, because from ashes, queens rise. Dear family, as we step into this story, I ask from the heart, don't just hear her pain and scroll away. Subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. So Nora, and every woman who has ever been abandoned in her sorrow, knows she's not alone. The rain poured harder as the priest whispered the last prayer. Thunder rolled above the cemetery like a warning from heaven. Nora Williams stood beside the coffin, her black veil clinging to her face, her fingers gripping a single white lily. The casket holding her mother sank slowly into the ground, taking with it the last piece of her heart. "Rest now, Mom," she whispered, voice trembling. But Ethan, her husband, shifted impatiently beside her. His eyes darted toward his watch, his shoulders tense under his black coat. "We've been here for hours," he muttered. "It's just a funeral, Nora. You need to move on." The words struck her like a slap. She turned to him in disbelief. "Just a funeral?" she echoed, her voice breaking. "It's my mother's burial, Ethan. My only family." Behind them, a woman in a dark gray dress stepped closer. Lydia Cole, Nora's childhood friend. Her makeup was perfect, even in the rain. She reached for Ethan's arm, pretending to steady him. "She's just hurting, Ethan," Lydia said softly, eyes flicking toward Nora with quiet pity. "Grief makes people say things." Nora's breath caught. Lydia, her friend, had been spending too much time around Ethan lately, always helping, always whispering comfort that sounded too close. From across the grave, Charles Williams, Ethan's father, shook his head with cold disapproval. "Your wife has become a shadow, son," he said under his breath. "You can't let her drown you too." But Nora heard him. The words sank deeper than the coffin itself. A shadow, a burden. That was what she had become in their eyes. She fell to her knees beside the grave, clutching her mother's silver bracelet so tightly it cut into her palm. Her sobs mixed with the rain. Around her, umbrellas shifted, guests looked away, and even the priest hesitated before walking off. Ethan sighed loudly. "Let's go," he said. "Standing here won't bring her back." Nora lifted her tear-streaked face. "You can leave if you want, Ethan," she said quietly, "but I'll stay with her a little longer." He turned away without another word, and when he did, Lydia followed, her heels sinking slightly into the wet ground as she tucked her hand around his arm. Nora's world blurred. The man who promised to love her through sorrow was walking away before the grave was even covered. Her mother's voice echoed faintly in her mind. "When people show you who they are, believe them." She stood there long after the others had gone, rain dripping from her veil, her body trembling from grief and disbelief. The earth was still open, and so was her wound. As the last car left the cemetery, lightning cracked the sky, and for a split second, Nora thought she saw Lydia looking back through the car window, smiling, and deep in her heart, something shifted. The warmth of love began to die, replaced by a silence that would soon become strength. The slamming of the mansion door echoed through the hall like thunder. Nora flinched. The sound reminded her of the coffin lid closing. She stood in the doorway, still in her black dress, raindrops dripping from her hair onto the marble floor. Ethan's voice thundered from the living room. "For God's sake, Nora, take that dress off. You look like death itself walking around my house." She turned slowly, her face pale. "It's been 3 days since the funeral, Ethan," she said softly. "I'm still grieving." He scoffed, tossing his car keys onto the table. "Grieving doesn't mean drowning everyone in sorrow. My father's right. You need to stop living in the past." Charles Williams, tall and silver-haired, sat in the corner sipping his drink like a judge waiting for a verdict. His cold eyes met hers. "Your mother was a good woman," he said flatly, "but Ethan needs stability. You can't keep him chained to your tears." Nora swallowed hard. "Stability?" she whispered. "You mean pretending nothing happened?" Ethan rolled his eyes. "Lydia came by today," he said. "She asked how you're doing. Maybe you should talk to her instead of crying into your pillow." The name cut deeper than he realized. Lydia, her friend, the woman who had stood beside her at the grave, pretending to care. Nora's chest tightened. "She's been here again?" Nora asked quietly. Ethan shrugged. "She's been supportive, unlike you. She understands what it means to move on." For a moment, silence filled the room, thick and heavy. The fireplace hissed softly. Nora stared at her husband, wondering how grief could make him a stranger so quickly. She spoke carefully. "You're calling my mourning weakness, but you didn't even shed a tear at the funeral." Ethan slammed his glass on the table. "Because someone has to stay strong. Not everyone enjoys being pitied." Her eyes shimmered. "Strong doesn't mean cold, Ethan." Charles rose, setting down his glass. "Enough," he snapped. "You two are embarrassing this family. Son, have Lydia accompany you to the gala tomorrow. She's respectable, elegant, not like this chaos." Nora's breath caught. The gala. So soon, so easily. Ethan didn't argue. He simply nodded. "Maybe that's what I'll do." That night, Nora sat alone on the edge of their bed, clutching her mother's silver bracelet. The house was silent except for the faint hum of rain outside. She thought about the vows he once whispered. For better, for worse. But she realized he meant only the better. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Hollow, forgotten, disposable. She whispered to herself, "Maybe grief isn't the only thing ending here." Downstairs, the sound of a woman's laughter echoed faintly through the hallway. Lydia's voice. Nora froze. Her eyes widened. She stood up suddenly, her bracelet slipping from her hand onto the floor with a sharp metallic clink. Her world was about to change again. The sound of paper hitting the table was louder than thunder. Nora flinched as a stack of documents slid across the polished surface toward her. Her hands trembled before she even looked down. "Sign them," Ethan said coldly. He stood tall, dressed sharply, eyes void of warmth. "It's a divorce. It's better for both of us." For a long moment, Nora couldn't speak. Her lips quivered, her eyes red from sleepless nights. "You're serious?" she whispered. Lydia Cole stood near the doorway, pretending to avoid their eyes. She wore a silk blouse and faint perfume that didn't belong in a married woman's home. "Ethan," she said softly, "maybe this isn't the right moment." He didn't turn to her. "It's the perfect moment," he said. "She's been living like a ghost. I need to live again." The words shattered what was left of Nora's strength. She reached for the papers with shaking fingers. The title blurred through her tears. "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." Her voice broke. "My mother's grave is still fresh, Ethan. How can you do this now?" He crossed his arms. "Your grief isn't an excuse for neglect. I can't keep watching you cry over someone who's gone." She looked up at him, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You promised to stand by me in everything." He laughed bitterly. "That was before you stopped being a wife." The room fell silent. The clock ticked slowly, cruelly. Nora's breathing quickened as her eyes met Lydia's. For a second, she saw guilt flicker across Lydia's face, then vanish behind a calm, practiced smile. Charles entered from the hall, his presence colder than the marble floor. "It's for the best," he said, glancing at Ethan. "You can't build a future with a woman who lives in the past." Nora stood, gripping the table edge for balance. "A woman who lives in the past?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You mean a woman who just buried her mother? Who gave her everything to your son?" Charles's expression didn't change. "You'll thank us one day." Lydia placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Let's go. She needs space." That small touch, that single motion, was enough. Nora saw it clearly now. The closeness, the comfort, the betrayal that had been blooming right under her roof. "You can have each other," Nora said quietly, tears falling freely. "But one day the truth will visit both of you, and you won't be ready." Ethan turned away, grabbing his keys. "I already am." The door slammed behind them, leaving her alone in a house that no longer felt like home. Nora sank to her knees, sobbing, clutching her silver bracelet until her palm bled. "Mom," she whispered, "I have no one left." Lightning flashed outside. In its glow, a shadow appeared, the kind face of an older woman at the gate, holding an umbrella. Grace Miller, the caretaker next door, was watching quietly. And in that quiet gaze, Nora's next chapter was waiting to begin. The sky broke open in a storm that night. Rain slammed against the roof like it was trying to drown the world. Nora stumbled down the driveway, her black dress soaked, her bare feet splashing through puddles. The silver bracelet slipped from her hand, but she didn't stop to pick it up. "Why, Ethan?" she cried into the rain. "Why now?" Her voice vanished in the thunder. Lightning flashed across the dark clouds, lighting up her face, tear-streaked, lost and pale. She walked with no umbrella, no destination, just pain leading her steps. Her body trembled as wind whipped through the empty streets. Cars passed without slowing. She clutched her chest, her breath shallow. "Mom," she whispered, "I wish you could tell me what to do." Then her knees buckled. The world spun. The last thing she saw was the glow of a porch light in the distance before everything went dark. Moments later, a door creaked open. An older woman gasped, "Oh, dear Lord! Child, are you okay?" Grace Miller, her neighbor, a retired nurse and caretaker, ran through the rain toward her. She had warm brown eyes and a voice that carried both strength and comfort. She knelt beside Nora, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "Stay with me, sweetheart," Grace whispered, lifting her carefully. "You're freezing." Nora faintly opened her eyes. I have nowhere to go," she murmured. Grace tightened her grip. "You do now." Inside Grace's small, cozy home, the light was soft and golden. She wrapped Nora in a thick blanket and placed her near the fireplace. The scent of tea and old wood filled the air. A kettle whistled gently on the stove. Nora shivered, whispering, He left me. He left me after the funeral." Grace's heart ached. "Then you let him go," she said simply. "People who abandon you in the storm don't deserve a seat when the sun returns." Nora's eyes filled again. "But I have nothing left. No family, no home, not even strength." Grace sat beside her and squeezed her hand. "You still have your heart," she said softly. "It just needs time to heal. You'll see. Sometimes broken things are just waiting to become stronger." The fire crackled, filling the silence with gentle warmth. Nora leaned back, exhausted, her head resting on the couch cushion. For the first time in days, her breathing slowed. Outside, the rain began to ease. The storm was ending, but inside, something new was beginning. Grace looked at her kindly. "Rest, Nora. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next." As Nora drifted into sleep, her fingers found the corner of the blanket and brushed against something cold and familiar. Grace had found the silver bracelet in the mud and cleaned it. It now rested on the table beside her. And somewhere in the quiet, unseen, a car slowed in front of the house. Ethan's car. He didn't step out, but his eyes lingered on the light in Grace's window before driving off into the darkness. He had no idea that the woman he cast away had just found the person who would help her rise again. Nora woke up screaming. "Mom!" she cried, sitting up in panic. Her heart raced as her eyes darted around the unfamiliar room. Warm lights, floral curtains, a faint smell of tea. It took a moment before she realized where she was. Grace Miller's home, the place she'd been brought to after collapsing in the storm. Grace rushed in, holding a cup of tea. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now." Tears streamed down Nora's cheeks. "I dreamed of her again," she whispered. "She was calling me from the grave. I couldn't reach her." Grace set the cup down and gently held her shoulders. "That's not her calling you from the grave," she said softly. "That's her telling you to stand up again." Nora buried her face in her hands, her voice trembling. "But I don't know how. I don't even know who I am without her, or without him." Grace's gaze was kind but firm. "Then it's time you find out." Later that afternoon, Grace took Nora to a quiet clinic nearby, a modest place painted in calm shades of blue. Inside waited Dr. Adam Bennett, a compassionate therapist in his 40s with gentle eyes behind silver-framed glasses. He greeted Nora warmly. "You've lost a lot, haven't you?" Nora nodded weakly. "Everything that made sense." Dr. Bennett leaned forward. "Grief can feel like drowning, Nora, but sometimes healing begins when you stop fighting the water and let yourself float." She looked at him, silent but listening. His words didn't erase the pain, but they reached the part of her heart that still wanted to live. After the session, Grace smiled. "I told you, you're not alone in this anymore." Days turned into quiet weeks. Nora began to eat again, help Grace with cooking, and take slow morning walks. The color in her face slowly returned. One sunny morning, the doorbell rang. Grace opened it to find two women standing politely at the porch. Sonia Rivera, a confident lawyer in her 30s with sharp eyes and a briefcase, and Tara Quinn, a young intern with a notebook clutched nervously in her hands. "Mrs. Nora Williams?" Sonia asked kindly. "We represent the estate of your late mother, Mrs. Evelyn Holt." Nora froze. "My mother's estate?" Sonia nodded. "She left instructions for us to reach you only after her funeral. We've been looking for you." Grace stepped aside as they entered, sensing something important was unfolding. Nora's fingers tightened around her teacup. What instructions?" Sonia smiled gently but didn't answer. "You'll want to see this in person. Your mother's last letter is sealed at our office, to be opened by you alone." The words hit like lightning. Nora's heart pounded. "Her last letter?" she whispered. Sonia nodded. "Yes, and it comes with significant documents." Grace and Tara exchanged glances. Something big was coming. Nora looked out the window, where rain clouds began to gather again over the quiet street. She didn't know it yet, but her mother's voice was about to speak once more, through ink, through will, and through a secret worth $30 million. The office was silent except for the ticking of a small clock on the wall. Nora sat across from Sonia Rivera, her hands clasped tightly on her lap. The sealed envelope lay on the table between them. Thick, aged, stamped with red wax. The handwriting on the front made Nora's breath catch. It was her mother's. "Evelyn Holt." Her heart pounded. "That's her handwriting," Nora whispered. "She used to write my birthday notes that way." Sonia nodded respectfully. "Your mother prepared this with great care. She wanted it delivered only when you were ready to start over." Tara Quinn, the young intern, stood nearby holding a folder filled with legal documents. Her wide eyes flickered between them nervously, aware this was no ordinary will. Nora's fingers trembled as Sonia slid the envelope toward her. "Are you sure?" Sonia asked gently. Nora nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I've been afraid of losing her voice forever. Maybe this is her way of speaking to me one last time." With a deep breath, Nora broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter written in her mother's elegant hand. She opened it slowly, and as she began to read, her lips quivered. "My dearest Nora, if you're reading this, I am gone, but not far. You were my greatest joy, and I never wanted grief to chain you. I know your heart is kind, but the world can be cruel. That is why I have left you the strength to stand, even when love fails you." Nora's tears fell onto the paper. Her voice shook as she continued. Your Aunt Margaret Holt will guide you through what I've prepared. Trust her. She knows everything. Use what I've left not for revenge, but for rebuilding. You are worth more than sorrow." A knock on the door interrupted her sobs. Sonia looked up as the door opened, and there stood Aunt Margaret Holt, a tall woman in her 60s, elegant in a deep blue coat, her silver hair tied neatly back. "Aunt Margaret," Nora whispered. She hadn't seen her in years. Not since a family argument, long before her mother's illness. Margaret stepped forward, her eyes soft but resolute. "Your mother made me promise to stay away until this moment," she said gently, "because she knew you'd only be ready when you'd been broken enough to rebuild." She placed a new document in front of Nora. "This is the legal will. Evelyn Holt left you her entire estate, valued at $30 million. The properties, the trusts, everything." The room went still. Tara gasped softly. Sonia watched Nora's reaction closely. Nora covered her mouth. $30 million? Margaret nodded. "Under one condition. You must remain independent. Not a single cent can go to your husband, Ethan Williams." Nora's heart stopped. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the table. "She knew," she whispered. "She knew what he was." Margaret nodded again. "Mothers always do." Lightning flashed outside the office window as rain began to fall, just like the night Nora was cast out. But this time, she wasn't trembling. She was awakening. Her mother hadn't just left her money, she had left her purpose. And as Sonia began preparing the next documents, Nora looked out into the storm with steady eyes. "Ethan can never know," Sonia said quietly. "Not yet." Nora's voice was calm. "He won't." But somewhere across town, in a candle-lit restaurant, Lydia Cole was smiling, whispering something into Ethan's ear about an old rumor of Evelyn Holt's hidden fortune. The conference room lights glowed bright and cold. Papers rustled. Laptops hummed softly. Nora sat between Sonia Rivera and Aunt Margaret, her hands clasped tightly. The weight of $30 million felt heavier than any grief she had ever known. "We must move fast," Sonia said firmly. "Ethan Williams cannot know about this inheritance, not even a whisper." Nora looked up, her voice quiet but certain. "He'll come if he senses money. He always does." Margaret nodded solemnly. "That's why your mother planned for secrecy. Everything must go into a private trust, under your name only. Sonia will execute it." Sonia opened a folder filled with legal papers. "We'll call it the Holt Renewal Foundation. It will appear as a charitable fund. Nothing Ethan could trace to your name. He'd never suspect a grieving widow to own one." Tara, sitting beside her, scribbled notes nervously. "And I'll make sure the property titles transfer quietly. No publicity, no leaks." The atmosphere pulsed with intensity. Every word felt like a secret carved into stone. Nora's heart raced as she signed each document. Each signature was a quiet declaration that she would never be powerless again. Then Sonia paused. "There's one more thing," she said, her eyes meeting Nora's. "You'll need to change banks immediately. Ethan still has access to your old joint account." Nora's jaw clenched. "He took my heart. I won't let him take my future." Margaret smiled faintly. "That's my girl." When the last page was signed, the mood shifted. Nora leaned back, breathing deeply. For the first time since her mother's funeral, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a survivor learning how to rebuild. Sonia gathered the documents carefully. "From today, your fortune is secure, but you must remain silent. Pretend you're struggling. Let him believe you're still lost." Nora nodded, her expression calm but steely. "He left me in the rain. Let him think I drowned." Tara looked up, admiration shining in her eyes. "You're stronger than you think, Nora." But before peace could settle, Margaret's phone buzzed on the table. She frowned, answering softly. "Yes? What?" Her face went pale. "Someone's been asking about the Holt estate." Everyone froze. Sonia's head snapped up. "Who?" Margaret lowered her voice. "A woman named Lydia Cole said she's helping a client verify family assets." Nora's breath caught. Lydia, Ethan's mistress. The betrayal still burned like salt in a wound. Sonia stood instantly. "Then it begins. We move everything by tomorrow morning. Tara, file the second trust immediately. Nora, go nowhere public for now." Nora's voice was calm but laced with fire. Let them look. They'll find nothing but the ashes they left behind. As they hurried out, thunder rolled outside again. Rain streaked across the glass walls, echoing the storm she once cried under. But now the storm belonged to her. She turned to Sonia. They think I'm still broken. Let's keep it that way. Outside the same night, Lydia sat across from Ethan in a candlelit restaurant, whispering, I think her mother left something huge behind. Ethan's fork froze midair. How huge? Lydia smiled thinly. Enough to make her worth chasing again. The garden shovel slipped from Nora's trembling hands and hit the soil with a dull thud. She fell to her knees, panting, tears blurring her vision. Why can't I just stop shaking? She whispered, pressing her palms against the earth. Why can't I be normal again? Grace hurried out from the porch, apron still tied, worry etched across her face. Nora, slow down, child. You've been working since sunrise. I need to keep moving, Nora said, her voice cracking. If I stop, I'll think. And if I think, I'll break. Grace knelt beside her and lifted her chin gently. Breaking isn't the same as ending, sweetheart. Sometimes it's how strength begins. Nora's shoulders trembled as she buried her face into Grace's arms. I don't know how to live without her. Without him. Grace stroked her hair softly. You don't live without them, Nora. You live because of what they taught you. Later that afternoon, Tara arrived with a small basket of groceries. Her cheerful energy always filled the house with light. I brought vegetables and something special. She handed Nora a small notebook. Dr. Bennett said journaling helps you find your center again. Nora smiled faintly. He never gives up, does he? He believes in you, Tara said. We all do. Nora opened the notebook. On the first page, Tara had written a single line. You are not what they left behind. You are what you choose to become. Something shifted in Nora's chest, a quiet spark. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than pain. The next day, Nora began to follow a quiet routine. Morning walks, cooking lessons with Grace, weekly therapy with Dr. Bennett. Each day was a small battle, but each victory mattered. One afternoon, as she volunteered at a local community kitchen, a little girl handed her a handmade thank you card. The crayon drawing showed a smiling woman under the sun. That's you, the child said. You helped my mom when she was sad. Nora smiled through tears. She finally understood. She didn't need revenge to heal. She needed purpose. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the world gold, she sat by the window writing her first journal entry. Today I smiled again. Not because the pain is gone, but because I know I can live through it. Grace peeked in. You're glowing again, Nora. Your mother would be proud. Nora looked at the silver bracelet resting on her wrist. She's here, she said softly. Every time I breathe, she's here. But just as peace began to settle, Tara rushed in holding her phone. Nora, you need to see this. On the screen was a headline. Businessman Ethan Williams and socialite Lydia Cole debut at luxury gala. Sources say, wedding soon. Nora stared silently at the photo. Ethan smiling, Lydia's hand on his chest. Her chest tightened, but her eyes didn't fill with tears this time. They filled with resolve. Grace whispered, What will you do? Nora closed the notebook and stood up slowly. He buried me in grief. Now he'll see who rose from it. Camera flashes burst like lightning as Ethan Williams stepped out of his black limousine, Lydia Cole on his arm. The marble steps of the gala shimmered beneath the golden lights. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Mr. Williams, how does it feel to move on so soon after your divorce? Ethan straightened his tie, flashing a polished grin. Life doesn't stop for sorrow, he said coolly. I believe in celebrating new beginnings. Lydia squeezed his arm, her diamond bracelet catching the light. We're just enjoying happiness, she added sweetly, though her smile lingered too long for comfort. The cameras loved them. But behind every flash, a whisper followed. Didn't his ex-wife just lose her mother? Too soon, too proud. Inside the ballroom, music swelled. Ethan walked among investors, shaking hands, boasting about expansion plans. My new partner understands vision, he said loudly, eyes flicking toward Lydia. She's been a great influence. Lydia giggled softly, though her gaze kept drifting toward the other businessmen, especially Victor Cross, the quiet, silver-haired investor standing near the bar. He was the kind of man who didn't speak often, but when he did, rooms fell silent. Victor watched Ethan closely, his expression unreadable. "You speak of vision," he said calmly when Ethan approached, "but sometimes pride blinds us before failure." Ethan frowned, pretending to laugh. "Failure? That's not a word in my dictionary." Victor raised his glass slightly. "Then buy a new one." He walked away, leaving Ethan's smile frozen for a moment. Lydia leaned closer, whispering, "Don't let him get to you. He's just jealous." But Ethan's jaw tightened. "No one warns me about business, especially not him." Later that night, as champagne flowed and cameras flashed, Lydia basked in attention. She loved the way people looked at her, the envy, the admiration. She whispered to Ethan, "Do you think your ex-wife is watching this?" Ethan smirked. "If she is, I hope she finally sees what she lost." What he didn't know was that miles away, in Grace Miller's living room, Nora was watching, not out of pain, but clarity. The same reporters who glorified Ethan had exposed something else, the cracks in his business empire. Dr. Bennett's voice echoed in her memory from therapy. The ones who mock others' grief often end up begging mercy from it. At the gala, Victor approached Lydia as Ethan was distracted by reporters. "You enjoy luxury," he said with a faint smile. "Perhaps we can talk about a partnership, one that might make you richer than him." Lydia's eyes flickered. "What kind of partnership?" Victor's smile deepened. "The kind that ends arrogance." As the orchestra swelled and applause filled the hall, Ethan raised a toast. "To new love, new success, and a life without weakness." The crowd clapped, but Victor's gaze stayed fixed, cold, calculating. He saw what others didn't. The man's empire was built on ego, not wisdom. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, a storm gathering somewhere unseen. Lydia leaned close, whispering, "You're unstoppable, Ethan." But his reflection in the mirror behind her told another story, one of a man too proud to see the fall, waiting in his own shadow. The hotel suite door slammed behind Lydia Cole as she tossed her purse onto the couch. Her heels clicked angrily across the marble floor. "Who does he think he is?" she hissed. "Ethan talks about me like I'm just decoration." A deep voice replied from the balcony. "Because that's all he can see, Lydia." Victor Cross stepped out of the shadows, holding a glass of whiskey. His calmness was unnerving, like a man who always knew the ending before the story began. "He's blinded by his own reflection," Victor said. "But you see the cracks." Lydia folded her arms, her anger cooling into curiosity. "And what do you see, Victor?" "I see opportunity," he said smoothly. "His company's stock is slipping. He's ignoring investors. He trusts the wrong people, especially you." She smirked. "Oh, he trusts me too much. That's his mistake." Victor stepped closer. "Then maybe it's time you help him make a bigger one." The tension in the room thickened. Lydia stared at him, uncertain if she should be afraid or intrigued. "You're suggesting," he smiled faintly. "Information, Lydia, the kind that opens vaults and closes empires." For a moment, the room fell quiet except for the soft hum of the city below. Lydia's mind raced. She remembered how Ethan bragged about his unshakable empire, how he paraded her like a trophy. A man like that deserved to fall, but deep inside, a flicker of fear stirred. She had seen what he did to Nora when she was no longer useful. Victor noticed her hesitation. "Don't worry," he said, setting the glass down. "You won't be the one to fall. I'll handle the exposure. You'll simply guide me." Lydia turned toward the city lights. Her reflection glowed faintly in the glass. "And what do I get?" He poured another drink. "Freedom and wealth. More than Ethan could ever offer you." She smiled slowly, her greed swallowing her doubts. "Then we have a deal." Victor extended his hand and she took it, sealing an alliance born from pride and betrayal. Later that night, Lydia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone. Ethan's messages flashed. "Where are you? Dinner's ready. Don't keep me waiting again." She typed back one word. busy. Her reflection in the mirror was calm, almost regal. For the first time, she didn't feel like Ethan's accessory. She felt like power itself. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan celebrated a new contract, unaware that the documents Victor had slipped through his assistant's hands contained a poison clause that would soon bleed his empire dry. And far from the noise, Nora sat by her window under the same night sky, writing in her journal, "Some people chase gold and lose peace. I'm learning peace creates gold on its own." As she closed her notebook, a strange feeling pricked her heart, like a storm she couldn't see but could somehow sense. In another part of town, Lydia was slipping Ethan's business keycard into Victor's hand. "Just don't leave traces," she whispered. Victor's eyes glinted. "I never do." The knock on the door came like thunder. 3 hard, impatient raps that shattered the quiet of Grace Miller's home. Grace looked up from her knitting, startled. Who could that be at this hour? Before Nora could answer, the door burst open. Ethan Williams stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat, eyes wild with something between guilt and desperation. "Nora," he said breathlessly, "we need to talk." The room went cold. Nora froze where she stood, a teacup trembling in her hand. Tara, who had been helping with the evening dishes, moved instinctively between them. Grace's voice was sharp. "You don't barge into people's homes, Mr. Williams. This is not your house." Ethan ignored her. His gaze locked on Nora. "Please, just 5 minutes," he said, forcing a shaky smile. "You look different. Better." Nora set down her cup carefully. "What do you want, Ethan?" He laughed softly, pretending charm. "You know me better than that." He glanced around the cozy living room, the floral curtains, the calm air, the peace he once took for granted. "I was nearby, thought I'd check on you. It's been months." Grace folded her arms. "And now your conscience decided to wake up?" Ethan shot her a look, then turned back to Nora. "I made mistakes," he said. "I shouldn't have left the way I did. I was under pressure, my father, the company, everything." Nora's eyes stayed calm, unreadable. "And Lydia," he hesitated, "that's over." Tara stepped forward, chin high. "You mean until the next investor party?" He ignored her, forcing a smile again. "I've been struggling, Nora. The company's taken a few hits, but I can fix it. We can fix it. Maybe you could help me get back on my feet." Grace's chair creaked as she leaned forward. "Help you?" He nodded quickly. "You still have contacts. People respect you. If we could get a small loan..." Nora's quiet voice cut through the room like glass. "A loan? Ethan, you came here not for forgiveness, but for money." The mask slipped. His voice hardened. "Don't twist my words. I thought maybe you'd remember the good years. Before you turned cold." Tara stepped closer. "Before you divorced her after a funeral, you mean?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything." Nora stood, her expression steady. "Yes, I do, but I didn't destroy people on my way down." He looked at her for a long moment, realizing the woman before him was no longer the fragile wife he once broke. She was calm, dignified, untouchable. "Ethan," she said softly, "you taught me one lesson. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. And I have." He opened his mouth to reply, but Grace was already by the door. "Time's up." Ethan hesitated, anger flickering beneath his forced politeness. "You'll regret this, Nora," he said, stepping out into the rain. She watched him go, her voice quiet but firm. "Not this time." Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating a black car parked across the street. Inside sat a familiar silhouette. Victor Cross, watching. He made a note on his tablet. "The audit begins tomorrow," he murmured. "Run it again," Sonia Rivera ordered, her voice sharp as the hum of the office computers filled the air. The city skyline glowed outside her glass windows, but her attention was fixed on the spreadsheets before her. Michael Brooks, a seasoned forensic accountant with a calm, methodical air, adjusted his glasses. "I've run it 3 times already," he said, scrolling through the data. "The numbers don't lie. Ethan Williams has been moving funds through fake charity accounts." Ava Ellis, his young assistant, leaned closer, her eyes wide. He even used Nora's old foundation name, the Holt Family Relief Fund. It's like he wanted to mock her. Sonia's expression hardened. No, he wanted to erase her legacy and steal her mother's goodwill. Typical. Michael tapped a highlighted line on the monitor. Here, $2 million wired to an offshore account under a shell company. Guess who signed the transfer? Sonia read the signature slowly, her jaw tightening. Lydia Cole? Ava frowned. The mistress? The co-conspirator, Sonia corrected. They thought grief would make Nora blind, but they didn't realize who was watching. Meanwhile, in Grace Miller's home, Nora sat at the window, holding a cup of tea. The rain had returned, gentle this time. Grace joined her quietly. You've been thinking about him again, Grace said softly. Nora didn't deny it. Part of me still wonders if he'll ever feel sorry. The rest of me hopes he never does, because I've learned to stop waiting for his remorse. Grace smiled faintly. That's strength, dear, not bitterness. Strength. Nora's phone buzzed on the table. It was Sonia. We found something, the message read. I need you in my office. Tonight. Hours later, Nora walked into Sonia's law firm. Tara was already there, her notebook open. Sonia gestured toward the screen. Ethan's company isn't just failing. It's corrupt. He's been laundering money under charity names. We have proof. Ledgers, emails, transfer logs. Nora froze, her hand gripping the back of a chair. He used my mother's foundation name? Michael nodded gravely. He thought no one would ever check an inactive file. Ava added quietly, we'll expose him, but it must be done legally. Once this goes public, it'll destroy him. Completely. Nora's voice trembled, but not with fear. I don't want revenge. I just want truth. Let the world see who he really is. Sonia met her gaze, steady and proud. Then let's begin. Michael pulled out a folder marked Confidential. We'll send this to Judge Olivia Hart. Once she sees this, Ethan's assets will be frozen within 48 hours. Tara whispered, he won't see it coming. Nora looked out the window at the city lights flickering through the rain. He never did. Across town in Ethan's office, Lydia laughed over champagne. We did it, Ethan. The investors are back. But outside their glass tower, a courier approached the security desk, holding a sealed court order stamped with the judge's crest. Deliver immediately, he said. Sir, the accounts are frozen. The shout echoed through the glass halls of Williams Enterprises. Ethan stormed out of his office, his tie hanging loose, his phone pressed to his ear. What do you mean frozen? That's impossible. His accountant stammered through the line. Every asset, every transfer. There's a court order from Judge Olivia Hart. It's over, sir. Ethan's face went pale. No, that's a mistake. He turned toward Lydia, who stood near the window in a silk dress, pretending to stay calm. Lydia, he snapped, you told me everything was covered. You said the transfers were clean. She flinched, eyes darting to the door. I did what you asked. I only moved what you signed off on. Ethan grabbed the papers off his desk and slammed them down. You were supposed to protect me, not drag me into ruin. Before she could respond, the glass doors burst open. Two uniformed officers stepped in, led by Detective James Carter, a tall man with a composed but unyielding stare. Ethan Williams, he announced, you're under investigation for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and misuse of charity funds. The room went silent except for Lydia's sharp intake of breath. Cameras from the building's media department were already rolling. Ethan's voice broke. There's a mistake. I can explain. Detective Carter handed him a folded document. You can explain to Judge Olivia Hart. Court hearing tomorrow morning. As the officers escorted him out, flashes from reporters' cameras blinded him. Voices shouted questions. Mr. Williams, is it true you stole from your late wife's foundation? Did Lydia Cole help you move the money offshore? Lydia froze, eyes wide with terror. They're saying my name too? Detective Carter turned briefly. Yes, Ms. Cole. You'll be questioned as well. Panic spread across her face. She stumbled backward, knocking over a vase. This can't be happening. Hours later, the city news exploded with headlines. Businessman Ethan Williams arrested for charity fraud. Lydia Cole under investigation. At her penthouse, Lydia packed frantically when a knock came. It was Nathan Grant, the wealthy investor Victor Cross had introduced to her weeks earlier. "Nathan," she gasped, "you said you'd help me." He smiled coldly. "I said I'd use you, Lydia, and I have. The contracts are under my name now. Enjoy your freedom, while it lasts." He turned and left as the sound of approaching sirens filled the night air. Meanwhile, at Nora's quiet home, Grace turned up the volume on the television. Nora stood still as she saw Ethan being led away in handcuffs, his once perfect suit soaked from the rain. Tara whispered, "Justice moves fast when truth leads the way." Nora's eyes softened, but her heart didn't harden. "I don't hate him," she said quietly. "I just finally see him." On the TV, Judge Olivia Hart appeared briefly, her stern face commanding respect. "Integrity," she said to reporters, "is the only wealth that lasts." Nora touched her silver bracelet. "Mom was right," she whispered. "Some storms clean everything they destroy." Outside, thunder rolled again, but this time it sounded like applause. And far away, Ethan sat alone in a police car, staring out into the dark street where a billboard glowed with his own company logo, now being torn down. He whispered, "Nora, order in the court!" The gavel struck sharply as the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Ethan Williams stood at the defendant's table, pale and trembling. Cameras lined the back of the hall. The world was watching. Judge Olivia Hart, stern and calm, adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Williams," she said firmly, "you are charged with embezzlement, fraud, and exploitation of charitable assets. Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Your Honor, I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I lost control. My wife," he hesitated, "my ex-wife, she left me, and I fell apart." From the audience, Nora sat quietly beside Sonia Rivera and Tara Quinn, her silver bracelet glinting under the courtroom lights. She didn't move, didn't blink. Ethan turned toward her, his voice desperate. "Nora, please, tell them I'm not a monster. You know me better than anyone." The room went silent. Reporters leaned forward. Judge Hart looked up. "Mrs. Williams, you may speak if you wish." Sonia whispered, "You don't have to." But Nora rose slowly, her calm presence commanding every eye in the room. She faced the man who once threw her out in the rain. "I knew you once, Ethan," she said softly, "a man who smiled at sunrise and dreamed of better things. But then pride became your god, and greed became your language." Ethan's eyes filled. "I made mistakes," she nodded gently. "Yes, we all do. But you built your success on my mother's name, and you buried your conscience beside her grave." The gallery murmured. Even Lydia, sitting in the back row, lowered her eyes in shame. Nora took a breath. "Your Honor, I don't wish for revenge. I only want justice, and for every stolen dollar to return to the causes it was meant for." Judge Hart nodded slowly. "Spoken like a woman of grace." Then her gavel struck again. "Ethan Williams, this court sentences you to 12 years imprisonment and full restitution to the Holt Renewal Foundation." Ethan broke from the witness stand, emotion crashing through his facade. He stumbled across the courtroom floor until he was standing before Nora. Then he fell to his knees. "Nora, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Forgive me. I was blind. I was proud. I thought wealth made me powerful. But you—" His words broke as he reached for her hand. "You were the only real thing I ever had." The courtroom fell silent. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. Nora looked down at him, the man who once made her beg for love now trembling before her in shame. Her eyes filled, not with anger, but with quiet understanding. She spoke softly. "Ethan, forgiveness is free, but trust is earned. I forgive you, but I can never walk backward." He wept quietly, still on his knees, as Judge Hart's gavel struck once, sealing his sentence and his lesson. Nora turned toward the exit, the silver bracelet gleaming under the courtroom light, symbol of grace that outlived pain. The crowd gasped. Lydia wept silently. Ethan collapsed into his chair, whispering Nora's name as officers approached. Detective James Carter stepped forward, guiding Ethan away with quiet authority. "Sometimes the hardest prison he said softly, is the one built inside our hearts. Nora watched as Ethan was let out. There was no hatred in her eyes, only peace. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Nora paused at the steps, the sun breaking through gray clouds. She spoke clearly. Grief taught me patience, betrayal taught me strength, and forgiveness taught me freedom. My mother's dream now lives through the Holt Foundation for Grieving Women. Cameras flashed. The crowd erupted in applause. Paula Green, the gossiping neighbor who once mocked her, wiped her eyes. She really rose from it all, she whispered. Later that evening, Nora stood beside Grace on the foundation's opening night. Children laughed, women smiled, and music filled the air. Nora touched the silver bracelet and whispered, "We made it, Mom." The lights reflected in her eyes. Not tears, but victory. And far away in a dim prison cell, Ethan stared through the bars, whispering to no one. She really did. Outside, thunder rolled once, distant, fading, as the world turned quietly toward a new dawn.